Hey all, this is Keith. Welcome to Keith Speaks. Now, let me tell you about a document most people have never heard of. Not because it was classified, not because it was not or was leaked, but because it dropped September 25th, 2025, in the middle of a news cycle covering Venezuela boat strikes, Russia, Ukraine, Gaza, political drama, and whatever else was trending. And it got buried exactly the way they needed it to get buried. National Security Presidential Memorandum 7, NSPM 7, titled Countering Domestic Terrorism and Organized Political Violence. Sounds reasonable. Nobody's for terrorism. You hear that title and you move on. That's the point. But stay with me. The opening reads like a genuine law enforcement response. Charlie Kirk was assassinated. 2 attempts at that time on Trump's life during the 2024 campaign. ICE officers attacked in Los Angeles and Portland. Yeah, right. Real events, though. Real violence. You're not alone. And then you keep reading. Section 1 lists what they call, and I'm quoting directly, common threads animating this violent conduct. Anti-Americanism, anti-capitalism, anti-Christianity, extremism on migration, race and gender, and, hear this one specifically, hostility towards those who hold traditional American views on family, religion, and morality. That is not a terrorism profile. That is a political opponents list with national security letterhead on it. Watch the pattern. Now, let's be precise about what that list covers. Anti-capitalism, labor organizers, democratic socialists, anyone who has ever questioned who owns the infrastructure. Anti-Christianity, secular Americans, people who critique Christian nationalism as a political project, which is a factual critique, not a violent one. Gender extremism, their words. Trans advocates, their families, their allies. Immigration extremism, pro-immigrant nonprofits, sanctuary city advocates, anyone who has ever protested an ICE facility. The document draws no line between protected political speech and investigable conduct. It simply says these beliefs are connected to violence and directs the full weight of federal law enforcement to find the people holding them. That is not a counterterrorism document. That is a targeting document dressed in counterterrorism clothes. Now, the mechanism. NSPM 7 activates the National Joint Terrorism Task Force and its local offices. Over 4,000 personnel, roughly 200 task forces nationwide. Mandate, investigate, prosecute, and disrupt. But read the next line. Investigations extend to institutional and individual funders and officers and employees of organizations that sponsor or otherwise aid and abet the principal actors. You don't have to throw a punch. You have to have written a check to the wrong organization, as defined by an administration with a list. Treasury gets pulled in. Financial institutions directed to file suspicious activity reports. The IRS commissioner gets specific instructions on taxes organizations. And on the same day NSPM 7 was signed, the Department of Justice announced an investigation into the Open Society Foundations. Same day. That's not coincidence. That's a rollout. Follow the money. Now, the ACLU will tell you, correctly, that this memo creates no new federal powers, no new crimes. The domestic terrorism designation has no legal enforcement mechanism. And that's true. But here's what the analysis misses. An investigation does not need to end in a conviction to destroy an organization. A JTTF visit is expensive. An IRS audit is time-consuming. A FARA inquiry can freeze operations for years while the legal bills stack. Staff leaves, donors disappear, the board resigns. The process is the punishment. They don't need to win in court. They need to make the fight costly enough that people stop fighting. This is not new. Hoover's COINTELPRO ran from 1956 to 1971, designed, in its own language, to expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, and otherwise neutralize black leaders, civil rights organizations, labor unions, and student movements. They took a full congressional investigation to shut it down. Then 9/11 happened, and most of those reforms quietly disappeared. The surveillance apparatus turned on Muslim communities, then Black Lives Matter, then environmental activists, then pro-Palestinian organizers. Each time, national security. Each time, the definition of terrorism. NSPM 7 is not new. It is the latest version of a program that has been running since this country decided certain kinds of organizing were too dangerous to leave unwatched. What's new is how explicit they are being. They wrote the ideological checklist directly into the document and signed it. They're not pretending anymore. Now, let's talk about the budget. Because a memo is rhetoric, a budget line is infrastructure. April 4th, 2026, buried inside a $12.5 billion FBI spending request, the NSPM 7 Joint Mission Center. Already operational, already running, staffed by 10 federal agencies, and the DLJ is requesting $166 million and 328 positions to fund it, including 130 special agents. 130 agents dedicated to this. Hold one word from the budget language, one specific word that most people are going to miss: proactively. The JMC is tasked to proactively identify networks and prosecute domestic terrorists and related criminal actors. Not investigate crimes that were committed, not respond to violence that occurred. Proactively identify people they believe might commit crimes based on the ideological profile in Section 1. Pre-crime, with 9 figures behind it, and a dedicated interagency command structure that is already built and already running. An intelligence official confirmed on the record that NSPM 7 authorized bypassing standard surveillance rules on American citizens without cause. The domestic terrorism watch list sat at roughly 5,000 Americans when the memo was signed. The same official said it could double within months. That is not a terrorist watch list. That is a political opponents list with a federal budget attached. And look at who they named as the threat vector in that budget. Popular social media platforms, smaller websites with targeted audiences, and encrypted chat applications. Smaller websites with targeted audiences, encrypted chat applications, an independent creator, a newsletter, a podcast, a community group chat, a signal thread with people who share your politics. Under this framework, depending on the beliefs of those in those conversations, and that is an infrastructure a funded interagency task force is now mandated to monitor. Fahrenheit 451 without the flame. They don't need to burn the books. They just need to make the people holding them afraid to be seen reading. The Brennan Center documented that NSPM 7's own incident list is cherry-picked. January 6th, not in the document. The Buffalo grocery store shooting by a white supremacist, not in the document. The 2025 shootings of 2 Democratic Minnesota state lawmakers, not in the document. One directional threat picture to justify a one-directional apparatus. 31 members of Congress wrote a letter. Over 3,000 NGOs signed in opposition. Miles Taylor, who ran DHS under Trump's first term, called it Orwellian beyond belief. They kept building. Here's what I want to leave you with. NSPM 7 is the political infrastructure component of a larger architecture. The mechanism that keeps everything else standing by, making sure the people who would organize against it are too busy defending themselves to build anything. They named the beliefs. They funded the center. They built the watch list. They're monitoring the platforms. And they call it safety. The document is public. The budget, public. The receipts are sitting on the White House website with the date and a signature. Watch the pattern. Use your voice. While the framework to suppress it is still just a budget request and not a conviction. The facts say this is not counterterrorism. This is the list. I'm Keith, and this is Keith Speaks.